Do the Colorado Avalanche actually make NHL players better? I looked at the numbers to find out. A couple of ground rules here. I started with players from 2019 onward. That is the last 4 years of off seasons to look at for data. During that stretch, the Avs were a competitive playoff team, so that's the data set I'm working with. I am also only looking at off-season acquisitions of players that came from another team. So, players that were acquired in season aren't looked at. That's because you end up with a lot of weird small sample sizes that can do funny things with the numbers, and I want to see what the players do coming from somewhere else. For the purpose of this experiment, I'm only looking at their first year in Colorado. I'm trying to see if Colorado immediately made them into more productive NHL players. And finally, I only looked at NHL regulars, players who played at least half of the season with Colorado in the NHL. This gave me a pool of 12 players over the last 4 off seasons, 8 forwards and 4 defensemen. I'm calling Curtis McDermott a defenseman. Starting in 2019, the Avs acquired 5 forwards that offseason, starting with Pierre-Edouard, who had 22 points in 69 games, a 26-point pace across a full 82-game season. Andrei Burakovsky, who had 45 points across 58 games for a 64-point pace across 82. Joonas Donskoi with 33 in 65 for a 42-point full season pace. Nazem Kadri with 36 in 51 for a 58-point pace. And Val Nichushkin with 27 in 65 for a 34-point pace. All 5 of these forwards outperformed their previous season in their first year in Colorado. In the case of Burakovsky and Nichushkin, significantly so. And while it's not necessarily in the scope of this video, Donskoi, Nichushkin, and Kadri would all go in to have significantly better seasons down the line with Colorado. As you'll see at the end of this video, the Avs have been particularly successful when it comes to finding forwards in the offseason that come into Colorado and perform and produce better. 2020 only saw 2 of these acquisitions. You have Brandon Saad and Devon Toews. Saad had 24 points in 44 games, a 45-point pace across an entire season, and Toews outproduced him slightly with 31 points in 53 games for a 48-point pace. Obviously, we know what Toews developed into here in Colorado. That first year was still better than anything he did in New York, but he hadn't quite fully matured into the beast that he is today. Saad is the first guy in this video that actually performed worse in Colorado than in the previous season with a different team. But calling it worse is fairly negligible. It was just a 2-point pace worse than what he was on in St. Louis in the previous season. Spoiler alert, Saad is the worst case forward in this video. 2021 really saw the Avs only add 3 depth players in this way. Darren Helm, who had 15 points in 68 games for an 18-point pace. Jack Johansen with 9 points in 74 games for a 10-point pace in 82. And Curtis McDermott with 5 points in 58 games for a whopping 7-point pace. Both Helm and Johnson outperformed their previous seasons by a marginal amount, and Curtis McDermott was worse, but a bit of an outlier given the weirdness of the 13th forward/7th D role that he played. In 2022, the Avs had 2 players that meet the criteria for this video, Brad Hunt and Evan Rodriguez. Hunt had 10 points across 47 games for a 17-point pace, and Erod had 39 in 69, nice for a 46-point pace. Hunt is the only player on this list that was significantly worse in Colorado than he was with his previous team, and he's another one of those in that category of wasn't really supposed to be in the lineup, but ended up there because of injuries and external factors. And then Erod falls into the large group of players who performed marginally better in Colorado. So when you take all of these players and average them out, across an 82-game season, you can expect a player to score about 7 more points than he did the previous year when he comes to Colorado. When you remove defensemen from that equation, because you acquire defensemen like a Jack Johnson or a Curtis McDermott, not for their production, but for other reasons, you get a forward group that you can expect about 11 more points across a season from. 11 points is a significant number, and when you apply that to the 5 forwards the Avs have acquired this offseason that are expected to be everyday players in their lineup, you get this. Miles Wood with 39 points, Jonathan Drouin with 41, Ross Colton with 43, Ryan Johansen with 51, and Tomas Tatar with 59. Now take these numbers with a grain of salt. This does not account for things like injury. It's only looking at an 82 game pace. It does not account for role changes coming from a previous team. Editor's note here, especially for Tatar and Wood, these numbers are probably on the high side because they are likely to play smaller roles in Colorado than they did on their previous teams. For those middle three, though, I think these are probably fairly realistic expectations. Of the 8 forwards the Avs have acquired from 2019 through 2022's offseason, 7 of the 8 of them did perform better in Colorado, and 3 of those 8 put up what were career numbers at the time. So even if these forwards don't hit that increase of an 11-point pace on average, you can still expect them to, at minimum, perform as well as they did last season, and most of them, if not all of them, should perform a little to a lot better. So yes, when Colorado acquires a player, they do get better.